Happy Mother's Day. National Mother's Day was first observed on May 9, 1914 by an act of Congress. President Wilson then stated that the second Sunday in May would be a time of public expression of our love and reverence for the mothers of our country. Mother's Day is a time for us to recall our mothers and to thank them for all the work that they do and for every effort they've put into our lives. Many people have mothers still alive, and this is a day where they take time to thank their moms with gifts of appreciation and time spent. And normally we take moms out to lunch and other things, but this year may be a little different due to the virus. However, it's still an opportunity for us to recall our moms and, quite frankly, to say thank you. For those of us who have a mother, I would encourage you to go ahead and give them thanks for all the efforts they've done. For those of you who, like myself, mom is no longer around, it's an opportunity for us to actually stop and to think about what they taught us, what they wanted to leave us, and quite frankly, just, the impact they've had in our lives. This morning, I want to look at a passage in the Bible that kind of deals with a mom's advice. It's found in Proverbs 31. Proverbs 31 is far more known for its efforts in terms of finding a good wife material. And so often the first part of Proverbs 31 actually gets overlooked quite a bit. And so that's what we're going to look at, is this overlooked part that actually, I think, shows some wisdom of a mom. You see, in Proverbs 31, starting in the first verse, we see King Lemuel and his mother and her advice to him. And so I'd like to read that and then just make a couple of points real quick. So Proverbs 31, starting with the first verse, it reads, "The words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. What should I say, my son? What son of my womb? What son of my vows? Don't spend your energy on women or your efforts on those who destroy kings. It is not for kings, Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to desire beer. Otherwise they will drink, forget what is decreed, and pervert justice for all the oppressed. Give beer to the one who is dying and wine to the one whose life is bitter. Let him drink so that he can forget his poverty and remember his trouble no more. Speak up for those who have no voice, for the justice of all who are disposed. Speak up, judge righteously, and defend the cause of the oppressed and the needy." That's some advice from a mom to a king. We know very little about King Lemuel, but one of the fundamental things about this is that we do have advice from his mother that has survived through the ages. And so really, I think when we read this whole little aspect of Proverbs 31, we find one continuous thought, and that is advice from mom that basically says to live morally, live soberly, and live compassionately. Live morally, live soberly, and live compassionately. That's what mom says. So if we look at it and just break it down to those three, morally, soberly, and compassionately, we'll look at the first one about morally. Starting in verse 3 right there, after she goes through a question of what should I say, what should I say, she says the first one was, don't spend your energy on women or your efforts on those who destroy kings. So I think there's two aspects to that. And the first one definitely deals with sexual relations. I think from a particular standpoint, what mom is trying to tell King Lemuel is, hey, guess what? There is a lifestyle here that you need to follow. There are two reasons for that. There's a physical reason, quite frankly, and there's a practical reason for it. We find that it is immoral to seek after the wrong spouse. That is one that is you're not married to. Physical reasons for that we've seen throughout our history have been sexual diseases that have been transmitted. A lot of that would just simply have not existed had we been faithful to our spouses. And then, of course, the second one is the practical reality of just look at the divorce cases. It's amazing, actually, just how much damage is actually done just because of a marital affair. So what King Lemuel's mom is telling him is, hey, get your head squared on straight, focus on your wife. That's what first advice is, focus on your wife. But then she also says something else. She goes, don't send your energy on efforts on those who destroy kings. That's a very interesting way to say it. And I think she's saying live morally in regards to the way you live your life in general. That's lifestyle, that's your work, that's your ministry, that's things that happen on your home front. Things that would destroy kings or, quite frankly, anybody, ruin people. It's not for us to be sitting around and pursuing things that can cause a lot of havoc. I think what King Lemuel's mom is basically telling him is, hey, guess what? There are things out there that are dangerous, that are bad for the family structure, that are bad for your job, that are bad for people in general. try to avoid those. That's what she's saying. Don't spend your energy on these efforts that are just not helpful in any which way, shape, or form. So we see Mom says live morally. That's the first step, is just a moral lifestyle. And, I can't emphasize this enough. My mom said pretty much the exact same thing to me many times over. Live morally, watch what you do, make sure what you say is right. Everything in your lifestyle needs to line up with what you believe. That's what she would tell me. Live morally. The second one she says is live soberly. And she just talks about quite a bit about this, actually. She says it's not for kings, Lamel. It's not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to desire beer. Otherwise, they will drink, forget what is decreed, and pervert the justice for the oppressed. Instead, you're supposed to give the beer to the one who is dying and wine to the one whose life is bitter. Let him drink so he can forget his poverty and remember his trouble no more. So right there we have kind of a unique thing. And I want to say right off the bat that I don't believe the issue of alcohol is at hand here. She's not saying avoid it at all times. She's not saying don't drink it at all. The word that we want to really emphasize here is the word desire. Those who desire. And that's just something we really have to understand, is that the idea of living soberly means the desires that we have. That includes alcohol. That includes, I think, far more other things as well. We look in our lifestyle, many people have a desire to, quite frankly, be involved in certain things. A good example would be some of my coworkers I know are heavily involved in things like hunting or fishing. And there's nothing wrong with hunting and fishing necessarily, but when it becomes the focal point of your life and you ignore everything else in your life, including your family, including your job, including relationships, then it starts becoming a problem and it needs to be addressed. It's the same way it is with anything else in life. If you have a hobby or an activity or even your job itself, if those things start getting in the way of relationships, in the way of your family, in the way of, quite frankly, even your relationship with God, that is a point where you need to stop and reevaluate. It's not for us to desire these things. We're not supposed to. It's okay to have them. It's okay to do them. But when it becomes a driving focal point in our lives, there's something that is wrong, something that is missing. And so that's where we have, and I think it goes a little bit beyond just a simple addiction. It's also something that we are, desiring this. Oftentimes I think we often get so caught up in the reality of things that control us to the point where we ignore the reality that, there's things called temptations. There is, and we often struggle with them. Every person's different. Each person has a weakness. It's to be exploited by the enemy. We know that. But we're called here that we're not supposed to have them. It's the caution of a mom saying, are you supposed to be doing that? Is that a good thing to do? And she's saying, no, you don't want to be the one doing something that desirable that will cause problems. And she gives all the reasons why you're not supposed to desire the alcohol in this case. And she says, you will drink and forget what is decreed and pervert justice for the oppressed. In other words, you're going to be so caught up and so wrapped up in this thing, you're going to miss the reality of what you're actually called to do. Same is true with our activities and our hobbies and anything that we like or don't like. If we get so caught up in them, oftentimes we miss an opportunity to impact people. And that can be a bad thing. When you're so consumed with your job, when you're so consumed with hunting, when you're so consumed with, even if it's just watching TV, simple things like that can consume you to the point where you're like, that's all that your mind is focused on. That's all that you're doing. It's like walking around with a pair of blinders on, right? You're just not going to see anything else out there. The only thing you're going to pay attention to is what that is that you desire. And that's what King Lamel's mom's saying. It's not fitting to desire these things because you're going to forget. You're going to forget and you're going to have problems. She says it is far better for someone who doesn't have those responsibilities, far better for someone who struggles to even make it through life to have these kind of hobbies, these kind of desires. That way they can actually do them and kind of forget just, the rotten life that they got. That's what she says. She says, live soberly. She says, live morally. The final one she says is live compassionately. Take a look at what she says in verse 8, where she says, speak up for those who have no voice, for the justice of all who are disposed. Speak up, judge righteously, defend the cause of the oppressed and the needy. The first thing I think we can say is, basically just opening your mouth and saying things for people that can. There's an aspect that we want to talk about in our society that is basically just bullying. How many times have we heard this word, and especially in regards to school, right? Bullying is a factor out there. There's not a whole lot that seems to be going on, but everyone's throwing all kinds of theories out. And I think the fundamental reality that we're missing, and the simplest response we have to that kind of a juvenile behavior, is quite frankly just what King Lamel's mom says: stand up for those who can. Okay, it requires someone else to stand up for somebody. What King Lamel's mom says is help those who can't help themselves, essentially. So, in our daily lives, maybe that we don't see it in the school system anymore. Maybe we're long past that. Maybe we're in a different period in our lives. We're still called to help those who can't help themselves. We're still called to step out and be compassionate. We're still called to be that person to go out of your way to do something nice for somebody. Live compassionately. That's what his mom's saying. Live compassionately. Help those who can't help themselves. Open your mouth and speak for those who can't. And then she goes a little further when she says, speak up and judge righteously. There's an interesting statement there, judge righteously. It calls to mind a story I have of Napoleon, who, he was the emperor of France for a period of years and tried conquering all of Europe and ended up failing. But during his height of his power, there was a case that came before him, actually. And that case was a simple artilleryman had deserted his post and had gone home. He was a young man, probably 14, 15, 16, I don't know, and decided to go home and visit his family. He was caught, condemned, and sentenced to death. Desertion of your post is taken very, very seriously in the military terms, and Napoleon was within his rights to carry out that order. But the mom made an appeal to Napoleon herself, was granted an audience, and managed to get up there and pled for her son's case. And Napoleon said, woman, the judgment's just, it's safe, it's what it is. You do the crime, you're going to do the time. That's what Napoleon was saying. And the woman turned to Napoleon and said, yes, I know, but you can judge graciously as well. And I think that's what King Lamel's mom is doing. She is saying, judge graciously, judge righteously. The word there is, it just basically says, hey, guess what? Do the right thing when you make these judgment calls. And in our lives, we may not be kings. We may not have that opportunity that Napoleon did to show mercy to a condemned soldier. But we certainly have opportunity to judge righteously in all things. Now, we all make these judgments in our head all the time. Driving down the road all the time, you see these homeless panhandlers, and what goes through your head? What goes through my head? And we make snap decisions, and we make judgment calls based on things that we don't really know the backstory to. We don't understand the whole situation. We don't understand what's going on. We just go ahead and make the statement in our brain, pass judgment, and continue on our way. I think what King Lamel's mom is trying to say is we need to have a little more compassion here. Instead of casting judgment on these people that we don't know the backstory to, maybe we need to, sit around and talk to them. Maybe we need to spend the time and figure out why they're there, where they're at. What's their backstory? What's going on in their life? There's a challenge there for you and me, and just a modern day sense of our judgment and the way we do see things. All too often, I think that we also, are quick to rush to judgment based on things that we don't have all the facts to. We rush to judgment on things that don't really matter either. Many times I've heard stories of office problems, right, where they all have the same refrigerator, and you stick your lunch boxes in there, and then suddenly somebody's sandwich goes missing, and people go, oh, it had to be so forth and so on because they've done that in the past. Now, we rush to these judgment kind of things without even gathering any facts. And what Lamel's mom is telling him is, hey, judge righteously. In other words, make all the facts, get everything known, do the right thing in this situation, judge righteously. And then she says, defend the cause of the oppressed and the needy. It's just a fundamental statement that she's trying to say is, hey, guess what? Stand up for people that need standing up to. Have that compassion for your fellow humanity. In all things, just live compassionately. So we see in this little passage here, this Proverbs 31, the first half of Proverbs 31, where some advice from a mom. When she says, hey, live morally, live soberly, and live compassionately. on Mother's Day, it's a good idea for us to remember this lesson. I'm sure your mom has taught you many others, and don't forget those either. But today, be sure to remember and be sure to thank her if you can for all the effort that she put and all the times that she spent with you. And above all, maybe it's a good idea for us to remember this passage in the scripture as we go through our life and how to improve our life and just walk a normal life, to live morally, live soberly, and to live compassionately.